December 8th, and time for the Board of County Commission meeting of Indian River County to begin. I'm going to begin today with a moment of silence for the victims and families of the attack in San Bernardino, and then Reverend Steve Jones, the Vero Christian Church, is going to give the invocation, which will be followed by the pledge, which I'll lead. Please stand. One moment of silence, please. Reverend Jones.
Shall we pray? What joy for the nation whose God is the Lord, whose people he has chosen as his inheritance. You look down from heaven and you see the whole human race. From your throne you observe all who live on earth. You made our hearts and you understand everything we do. You watch over those who fear you, those who rely on your unfailing love. We put our hope in you. You are our help and our shield, and in you our hearts rejoice, for we trust in your holy name. Let your unfailing love surround us, Lord, for our hope is in you alone. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Reverend Jones. Next, I'll ask if there are any additions or deletions to today's agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Second. Motion to approve from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I don't believe that Tracy Levi from Safe Space is presently here. I was told she might be a few minutes late. So with the board's indulgence, we'll move ahead and then come back to that item at an appropriate point. Approval of the minutes.
So, go ahead, Commissioner Fletcher.
So moved for the regular meeting of November 10, 2015, as well as the regular meeting for November 17, 2015.
Second.
Motion to approve both meeting minutes from Commissioner Fletcher, seconded both times by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes like sign. We have informational items on number 7. Anybody care to pull one of those? We'll move on then to consent agenda. Is there anybody who'd like to pull anything from today's consent agenda from the board? There being none, I'll ask if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to pull anything from the consent agenda for discussion. There being none, I'll accept a motion.
Move approve.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to constitutional officers and government agencies. First up is Sheriff Darrell Law. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Chairman. Commissioners, in your backup, I certainly appreciate the opportunity to speak, but in your backup are the pro forma forecast for our mental health funding for the remainder of this fiscal, and any assistance would be greatly appreciated to help protect the community and those with mental illness.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner Fletcher. Motion from Commissioner Davis. Second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Next up, item 10, public hearing. We have a public hearing with Alfred and Betty Sammartino's request to rezone plus or minus 1.9 acres from commercial heavy to general commercial. Memorandum dated December 1st, 2015. This is a quasi-judicial item, so I would first like to note that the parties to the proceeding are Indian River County and Alfred and Betty Sammartino. And I'll begin by asking commissioners to disclose any ex parte communications, site visits, or independent investigations. I'll begin with Commissioner Fletcher.
No, and I can and will.
Commissioner O'Brien.
No ex parte communications. I frequently drive past this intersection, but not specific to the project, so I don't have any issues.
I've got no ex parte communications, and like Commissioner O'Brien, I've often driven past, but not with a view of today's item. Commissioner
Zork. No prior conversations with the applicant or represent the applicant. I am, as you're familiar with the area, drive it frequently. and no ex parte communication, and yes, I can keep an open mind.
And Commissioner Davis.
Been there, seen it, came back. No ex parte communications. Wouldn't know the Sorrentinos if they were standing in front of me, which they may be in a little bit. So.
And some of us did jump ahead to the open mind, so I'm going to go back from Commissioner Davis to
Yes, I have an open mind.
Commissioner Zorn.
Open mind?
Open mind.
See.
Can and will.
We're unanimous there. Very good. I will now open the public hearing, and I'll begin by asking the clerk if she would swear in all witnesses collectively. So anybody in the audience, if you're intending to or think you might speak today on this matter, will you please rise and take the oath?
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. We'll begin with a presentation by the staff. Good morning, Mr. Bowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Stan Bowling, Community Development Director. This is a request to rezone property from CH Heavy Commercial to CG General Commercial. The property is just under 2 acres in size, and it's located on the south side of Oslo Road, the east side of Old Dixie Highway, and to the west of the FEC Railroad. You can see from this aerial there are commercial developments to the east and to the north. Some to the west, an office development, and then residential on the west side of Old Dixie Highway in this particular area. The purpose of the rezoning is to allow certain types of commercial uses that are allowed in the CG district but not in the CH district. The applicant in particular is interested in allowing for a Dollar General retail store to be developed on the site, but regardless of that anticipated use, we have to look at the appropriateness of the zoning district in general, and in general CG allows retail uses as opposed to heavy commercial, which is more oriented toward warehousing and contractor trades types of uses. The Planning and Zoning Commission has heard this matter and is recommending that the Board of County Commissioner approve the request. Staff's also in favor of it. This particular property, you can see from this existing zoning map that there is heavy commercial on the west side of the FEC Railroad and some as well on the east side of the railroad. Heavy commercial, again, allows for warehousing, contractors' trades, some light type of industrial uses. And this entire stretch on the west side of FEC Railroad in this particular area of the rezoning is zoned heavy commercial. But there's also CG, general commercial oriented along US 1 and Oslo Road. And in this particular case, staff's opinion is that either the existing CH or the proposed CG is appropriate for this property. Because CG is appropriate because this property is right on Oslo Road, a heavily trafficked roadway. And so the proposed zoning would take this property to CG, which would be consistent with what is to the east and to the west of the subject property. With respect to this rezoning application, staff looked at concurrency, consistency with the comprehensive plan, potential environmental impacts from the rezoning, and compatibility with surrounding uses. And looking at all of the potentially impacted facilities, there is sufficient capacity and concurrency in all the areas that we review, including traffic, water, wastewater, solid waste, and stormwater management. So there are no concurrency issues with this request. The request is also found to be consistent with future land use policies, in particular those dealing with appropriate locations in the urban service area, and this site is within the urban service area, and also allowances for proper zoning for retail, office, and service uses, and this request would fulfill that policy. The site's land use designation is commercial industrial, and the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan. With respect to environmental impacts, there are a number of trees, native trees as well as exotics on the property. The impact is roughly the same for CH or CG zoning. Actually, in the CG zoning district, there's a little bit higher minimum requirement for open space, so we would actually probably get a little more tree preservation with the rezoning. Wetlands are on the property. It's adjacent to the FEC Railroad. They're relatively low functional value, and during site plan review, wetland regulations would be applied. Same with tree preservation, whether some protected trees are removed or mitigated, there'd be no difference between CH and CG except for the fact that CG will require more open space. So our assessment is that there'll be no adverse impacts environmentally speaking, with respect to the rezoning. With respect to compatibility, the site to the south is zoned heavy commercial, and the proposed zoning is heavy commercial. No incompatibilities there. To the north is Oslo Road and heavy commercial across on the north side on Oslo Road. No incompatibilities there. To the west is Old Dixie Highway and CG zoning, so no incompatibilities there. And to the east, the FEC Railroad and CG zoning. So we don't see any land use compatibility issues with this particular request. So it's compatible with surrounding uses. The request is consistent with the comprehensive plan, meets the concurrency test, and there'll be no additional environmental impacts if the request is approved. So staff supports the request, and staff and the Planning and Zoning Commission recommend that the board approve the rezoning request from CH to CG and adopt the ordinance attached in your backup. I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Stan. Does any commissioner have any questions of Stan? Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stan, can you put the aerial back up, please?
Sure.
So it's very adjacent to the railroad tracks here. Do we know yet, or will it be when they bring their site plan in, where the main entrance and exit will be from the store?
Right. They'll be off of Old Dixie Highway.
Off Old Dixie.
Right.
Okay. So if the proposed passenger train comes through and they put in some raised medians going back to the west, that won't block ingress and egress on Oslo because the main thing will be coming off Old Dixie?
That's correct, and that's regardless of whether this were zone CH or CG. They would have to come off the lower classification roadway, Old Dixie Highway.
Okay. And then just, are we, I guess the other CH properties are already utilized, so I guess in the big picture, we're not giving up any of our heavy commercial adjacent to the railroad that might be more appropriate for something that really is heavy commercial, or?
Right. That's an excellent point. In fact, we kind of keep track of heavy commercial and industrial zoning in the county, countywide, to make sure we do accommodate those other types of uses. And along major roadways like this, we have seen properties go to CG. We've supported that because of the high visibility, even though they're not accessing Oslo in this case. But I can tell you that we also have one rezoning application that will be coming before you all in February to go from a lower commercial to heavy commercial along FEC in the North County. So we see kind of a back and forth. We don't really see a net loss countywide.
And then looking at the traffic counts, I just found it's kind of interesting. It shows 8 trips in the morning peak hour and 77 trips in the afternoon peak hour. Is that just a function of the nature of this particular business, that most people are going to stop at the Dollar General store after work on their way home or something?
Yeah, we would. Traffic engineering has looked at those assumptions and has agreed with them. New trips, net new trips.
Yeah, net new trips, right. Yeah. It just seems so skewed to the evening trips. I found that kind of a little bit odd, but that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners at this time? I'll ask if the Sammartinos have any questions of staff at this time. No, not public yet, Bob. We'll get to you not yet, Bob. We'll get to you down the line.
No, I have no questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I'll ask if the Sammartinos have a presentation. Do you want to have any presentation today? No, very fine. Now I'll ask if there's any input from the public. Mr. Johnson, name and address for the record, please.
Bob Johnson, Corwin Subdivision. I have a question on notification to the local community as to the rezoning of this property, and who was notified and what comments were obtained.
Right. The standard notice was applied that all properties within 300 feet of the subject site were notified for the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing and for the Board of County Commissioners hearing. A sign was also posted on the site, and newspaper ads were run before the P&Z and the Board of County Commissioners meeting. We have not had any direct questions or comments on this. We did have a resident from the Oak Ridge subdivision here, the RS6 zoning here, a little bit to the southwest of the property. They did attend the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, and mostly they were interested in what type of development was going to be proposed to the northeast on the subject site. But they did not express any particular concerns.
Secondly, again, one of the representatives from the county commissioners didn't participate because the vote was 4-0 on the planning and zoning, and I was just wondering, this continues to be I don't know how many people are on the planning and zoning, but is 4 people legal? Just 4 people?
In fact, as I understand it, Bob, it took all 4 of them. If they'd have been 3-1, it would have failed. There's 7
How many
board.
people are
7.
7.
Yes, so it needed all 4 in order for it to pass.
Well, somebody continues not to be present. Each one of you has a representative on the board. Does your representative continue to?
I will look into that.
That's not the case there. They have been on a rotational basis. There are some commitments, and there have been some absences, and they have not been the same individual.
But my point is, if the board is supposed to have 7 people, then that continues on the planning and zoning, it continues to be a major tardiness on some of the representation. That's my point. And I'll leave it at that.
I'll find out how my appointee's doing and the at-larges.
O'Brien brought up a good point. I travel that quite frequently, that Oslo Road section, and when it comes to the traffic pattern, right now Walgreens has a very awkward traffic pattern that comes out onto Oslo, and by adding this, if it were to be built and the traffic were to be come out on Oslo, it would be almost impassable. So I was glad to hear that Stan said that the traffic would be entrance would be in and out of Old Dixie, and I know the veterinarian office across the street from it entrance is on Old Dixie, and so anyway, that's another point that I. The dollar stores are springing up in the county like weeds, and I was just wondering if there's any more dollar store applications in the mill stand. This is a great location, by the way, for a dollar store. I didn't mean to, but this is the way it's planned and coming down. But I want to let you know that the signs that are posted, my wife has a little better eyesight than I do, and she can barely read the signs that are posted, and there's hardly any way to stop to see what the signs mean. So I'd like to bring that to your attention too. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Anybody else from the public wish to speak on this? There being none.
Chairman.
Oh, sorry. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Jeremy Anderson, Hanlex Development, representing the petition. We're a 1,000 Colored Place, Apopka. I was not going to mention anything. I'm here in support of the petition, but there was continuing discussion on the driveway access points, and I wanted to clarify that. Of course, this is a rezone and not construction level review, but there is a full access driveway connection onto Old Dixie, and there is a right-in, right-out proposal on Oslo.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and of course, we're going through traffic engineering, and they're analyzing the trips and everything from a safety perspective. But I just want to be clear on that.
Sure. Thank you.
And the Public Works Director is allowed for that type of egress access in this particular location.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anybody else from the public? I'll ask now for final presentations, if there are any, first by county staff, then by Mr. Sammartino. There being none, I'll just ask Stan to make sure that the clerk gets a copy of your presentation. I'll now close the public hearing. Ask the commissioners if they have any comments or discussion at this point.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Zorc. Any questions or comments? There being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Yes, sir.
staying at this process, and I appreciate what the Sammartinos had to go through for this. This is really one, and your staff is right, this makes sense. I guess really what I'm wondering is, how hard would it be to craft in our land development regulations so this only had to go to a P&Z level versus a full county commission level, not to rezone, but if it meets the requirements of it's adjacent to a CG, it's on a road like Oslo, but basically the things that you said fit. Now, and for the applicant to come through, I mean, the process worked, but it had to come all the way for the Board of County Commissioners, and the additional time that took, and trying to be just a little more business friendly as a county. Is there some way we can craft this through that perhaps you could see through the land development regulations that wouldn't make it to where they had to come all the way before this board for a full blown review and rezone?
Right. The Planning and Zoning Commission is our land use planning agency. We have to look at, certainly it would take a change to the county regulations in certain circumstances, and I'd have to look at the state statutes to see if there's authority for rezoning to be granted by the local planning agency and not require a Board of County Commissioners approval. I'm not aware.
And I don't want to open the barn. Everything fits, but this clearly was one where staff said, yes, this is okay to be commercial general. And it's almost like, I remember doing this on 45th Street in US 1 where the Cumberland Farms is now. Yep. That was CH, and it just made sense. So it's almost like if there's a hard corner, it's a thoroughfare of some kind, and it's already, I don't know, I don't even know, quite frankly, whether CG was adjacent to that 45th Street or not.
Yes.
Was there? To the north? I think was that CG?
Yes, correct.
Okay. All right, well, maybe that
same on 8th Street, Glendale Plaza, it was the same thing, CH to CG. So we've certainly had a practice of this.
Right, and I agree with it. And not that this was the end of the world for them to have to go through it, but I just see it as a redundant step that this was more as much ceremonial as it was, in my opinion, practical. And there ought to be an easier way for us to do this for future applicants where it just simply makes sense to go from a CH to a CG.
Stan, when you're thinking about that, I'll just ask if you recall, or anybody in the community development area recalls, any controversial times when some change like this has taken place.
Not in the three circumstances I'm thinking of.
Okay.
This particular
and
case.
specifically, this is a corner.
Correct.
I remember one down South Vero near Bob Johnson's that was actually a CH to CG on about 10 acres down there. In fact, I think it's directly south of his subdivision that he lives in, I believe. That wasn't a corner. That was more of where you could have a big box retail come in. And perhaps those are the things that justify coming before the entire board so that's fully vetted. But these small parcels on a hard corner, they just make sense.
I don't think you're going to be allowed to have a rezoning that doesn't come to the board, but what I'm hearing from Commissioner Davis is some sort of, whether it be a special exception or the like, that would be for this type of use in the CG. Yeah, and they could have stayed CG and then
CH,
and then they could have gone through the special exception process and taken that through planning and zoning and gotten approved. But the full-blown rezoning from one district to the next is going to have to come back to the board.
I get that, and a special exception would still have to come before us, so that doesn't solve my problem.
Some of their administrative permit.
It would be administrative approval, perhaps.
Right, it'd have to be an administrative permit.
Yeah, there you go. And that would go before planning and zoning. That excites me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move on. I'm going to ask the county attorney to read the public notice item.
Actually, to the chair, I think we have a representative from Safe Space.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to read the public hearing, and then I was going to move on to that, and I was going to announce that if I was able to finish my comments. Thank you.
I'll be happy to read the one public notice item, notice of scheduled public hearing for December 15, 2015. This is Ron Taylor's request for an abandonment of a 30-foot wide right-of-way lying south of Lot 5, Lot B, of the Green Acres Estate subdivision. This will be legislative in nature. Again, this will be an item that will be heard as a public hearing on December 15, 2015. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Now I'll ask if Ms. Levy wants to come up and make the presentation for Safe Space. Name and address for the record, please.
Tracy Chiljean Levy, and I'm the Director of Development for Safe Space. Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and guests. I typically come here every year to accept a proclamation recognizing Domestic Violence Awareness Month, which I did just a couple of months ago, and I have no red high heels with me today. But I am here for another reason, and that is to acknowledge a new partnership and office space with the Clerk of Court, and to thank Jeff Smith for making this partnership possible. It all began for Safe Space 35 years ago, right here in Indian River County. And since then, the organization has grown from a little-known nonprofit to a thriving safe haven for a growing number of victims in our local area. Safe Space is the only certified domestic violence center on the Treasure Coast and the ultimate safety net for victims and their children in the local community. We offer safety, support, and education through emergency shelter, supportive living, and outreach services, helping victims become survivors by empowering them to create an independent life free from violence. Last year, Safe Space served close to 2,500 victims and children through shelter, outreach, and hotline, 500 of which were from Indian River County. Today, there are 48 women and children safe in our shelter, 9 women in our transitional housing program, and hundreds of others working with our advocates on an outreach basis. Safe Space may be best known for its shelter programs, but it's our outreach services that allow us to touch so many more victims than we could ever house in our residential programs. And one program in particular that brings me here today. I have with me our rural outreach advocate, Sidanelia Brosnick, who now occupies the space graciously provided by the clerk's office. Sidanelia has been with Safe Space for 7 years and working in her rural position for 5. She works in collaboration with organizations from within the migrant Spanish-speaking community to reduce barriers, share resources, and create innovative approaches to assist individuals experiencing domestic violence. She also facilitates individual advocacy meetings and weekly support groups in Spanish relating to the dynamics of intimate partner violence, the victim's legal rights, and available community resources. Since she's been in the courthouse, Sidanelia has been able to assist more victims with injunctions, has access to a website that makes it easier to file a petition, and the court has been referring more victims to her program. The location of her office has enhanced her ability to provide services, and her program participants have shared that they feel comfortable and safe there. Safe Space is grateful to the clerk's office for its partnership and support of this very special program. And I believe Sid would like to say just a few words.
Yes, I've been working for Safe Space for 7 years, and I'm very grateful for doing this job and serving all the victims. And I'm really grateful also to the clerk of court for giving me this opportunity of having this office at the court. And again, my participants always express that they feel very comfortable and very safe inside the court, and that allows me to provide a better service, because when you are dealing with these victims, they are coming through a really tough time. So it's very important for them that they feel safe where they are meeting with me. Remember, maybe the first time that they are asking for help. And for them to be in a safe place and be able to talk and express what's going on is very crucial. It sometimes is very vital for these victims. So again, I'm really very grateful for this opportunity, for this partnership, and I hope to continue more victims. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. Jeff, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased about this partnership as well. Clerks around the state have tried to form partnerships with their local spouse abuse entities all around the state, and I saw an opportunity that I could help Safe Space. And it also helps us because we have a lot of victims that come in to get injunctions, and then they don't know where to go from there. And so if they have a secure place in the courthouse where they can immediately go from one office to another to get the injunction and then go get the help they need, they feel protected, they feel secure in the courthouse. We had a small office that is too small to be a hearing room, and it's too small for the judges to use. And I saw this as a big need. We've had an increase here in domestic violence, injunctions, petitions, direction from victims. And so I took the opportunity to work with Safe Space and provide this little office where they can service their customers and provide something for the abused. And it's worked well, and I'm pleased that it's working so good, and it helps us as well as helps Safe Space. And you all are to be commended for having the foresight to see the need to build a courthouse several years ago that is functional, and I'm blessed that I could have a little space where I could help with safe space. So it works for everybody.
Well, thank you very much. It sounds like a wonderful partnership. I wish you good luck in it, and thank you all for your work.
Sure, I have a question of Jeff or Tracy. Maybe they could provide me with some answers or where to instruct some folk where to get some resources. If someone has had a situation described to me on a domestic violence case, third-time offender, the bond rate seems to be the same whether it's the first offense or the fifth offense. Would that be how that bonding amount is set on domestic violence accusers, I guess, or the one causing that? Where would somebody go to find out how that is addressed? Is that, I know the judges are filing, or somebody's setting bail for the offenders, and I just don't know the mechanism of who does that part.
Well, the legislature sets guidelines for judges to work with. I'm not sure what particular rules of law outside the legislative statutes would address that, but I'm sure your county attorney can look that up and get you that information, and I can also talk with the judge, the current judge that's handling that is Judge Paul Canarak. And the circuit does a really good job of having after-hours judges on call for incidents that happen after hours. One of my clerks is always on call as well. What happens is if a victim after hours calls for help, the sheriff's office responds and my clerk responds. And we take care of everything. We fax it to the on-call judge to get an injunction right away, and then they can call the after-hours number at Safe Space and make arrangements to be transported to the safe place that they have for them. So as far as the bond is concerned, I think the judges work within guidelines. I'm just not sure what those guidelines are.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Y'all keep up the good work.
We'll move to departmental matters, community development, consideration of allowing farmers market events in Gifford. Good morning again, Stan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the Gifford neighborhood plan, there's one particular action item that requires the board to consider farmers market type of uses and coming up with an allowance with our temporary use regulations for that particular type of use, and that's why this item is before you all this morning. Staff is looking for direction from the board as to whether you want us to proceed with a regulation. We do have a draft regulation in your backup. Right now, our temporary use permit regulations countywide would also apply in Gifford, but they would not allow for food sales, electrical. There's some separation distance standards that might not be appropriate for Gifford, and there is interest in the community, and so what's really needed to accommodate this type of use is Gifford-specific regulations. In fact, before the neighborhood plan was formulated in 2012, staff did have a workshop in Gifford on this issue, and there was interest in the use, but also concerns about security and appropriate locations and impacts on neighborhoods. So there's interest and concerns, and that's really what these regulations, I think, would need to address, opportunity and impacts. The temporary use permit approach, in staff's opinion, is appropriate because we can kind of see how things work. And it won't require a lot of investment up front. The proposed regulations that are before you are just that, a draft. We've gotten positive input from community leaders, but we do need to get, if we move forward, in staff's opinion, community input from interested parties. So we would recommend that if the board wants us to move forward, that we conduct at least one workshop in Gifford to get input. Limitations on hours of operation and days of the week are some positive types of things that we've gotten some input through the neighborhood plan process, and we've incorporated into the draft regulations. And staff's recommendation is that the board direct staff to go through the land development regulation amendment process and hold at least one workshop in Gifford to get input. As proposed, we're looking at commercially zoned sites or possibly public parks as sites for having these types of uses, and starting with an event type thing, so you could have more than one vendor or a single vendor. and have appropriate parking and security in the regulation itself and in the review. And again, staff would recommend that the board direct staff to move forward with this concept.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Flesher, then Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Chairman, this is highly supportable based upon past input as we had the hearings and workshops for the Gifford Neighborhood Plan. And I've heard from many of the constituents that want to have what they feel was old Gifford, the ability to be able to vend. There are some concerns whether it would conflict with existing tax-paying organizations or facilities, but I think that with the proper design, the proper workshop, and community input, and of course Stan's input, we can come up with a very favorable environment to be able to do this. Some of the suggested locations was the brownfield recovery site, which would be asphalted and then developed into a true open farmers market. But there were many ideas that were spawned by the Gifford Neighborhood Plan, and I believe I'm very anxious to hear more of it and to be able to support it. So if you'd like to have further discussion, but I'd be happy to support staff's recommendation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Davis.
Yes, I'm leaning in favor of it too, not knowing all the details clearly. But I've also have received some correspondence from some residents in the Roseland community about something it's kind of similar to this.
Yeah.
And so in this process, as planners, I've said, you're going to appreciate me probably saying this. What if we look at it countywide and try to make a policy? I don't want to gum down or gum up anything that they're trying to do in the community, in the Gifford community. But if we could look at it countywide, that if it's on public property, community property, recreational, that kind of things where it would fit in other areas of the county. I could see something like this actually happening out in the little park area or out near the fire department in Fellsmere, or not Fellsmere, Vero Lake Estates. And just, again, that's not commercial, but it is public property, and it'd be something that through the administrative permit, again, not to slow it down, and if it looks like it's going to be a fatal addition, can it? But I would like to look at this countywide.
And that's certainly something that can come out of evaluating to see how it works and get an example and see if it would apply somewhere else. I'm kind of curious. Calls from Roseland we usually get are concerns. You got support of this idea?
The other way, yeah.
Just want to make sure.
And the reason is it's away from the church.
Yeah.
This is down south. This is around the community center that they have down there, where they always have the Roseland barbecue, that kind of thing in the fall time. So.
And Stan, I've just got a couple of comments. One, it'd be nice to have the permit as simple as possible, and so that would mean less than a page. And I don't know if you have any fee that you have anticipated, but I would like there be no fee. And just to make it as simple as possible, this is the type of thing that a number of people ought to be able to just fill out the app over a phone. So if we can go ahead and try to make it so that it's so simple that somebody can fill out an application using the text on an iPhone or a smartphone, I think that would be a big plus, and I think it would start pushing us in the right direction.
And if I could just comment on that, our fee for a temporary use permit is $75,
Yeah,
and I just want to so it's not a large fee, but we can certainly look at the fee issue as part of the ordinance.
No offense, but if somebody wants a temporary use permit to put out a watermelon truck for a weekend, $75 is going to kill it. And that's why I would like to see it as simple as possible. We can have that discussion later with the board, but again, given the people who I believe would want to utilize something like this, I would think that, well, I would personally think that a long application and a $75 fee would just kill it, but we can have that conversation another day. I'll now ask if there's anybody from the audience who wants to speak on this item.
Julianne Price, Department of Health. I just wanted to make it known that we support staff's recommendation. I think for a long time we've been using our enforcement as a short-term fix to these problems, and I believe this provides a long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm dressed for the United Way. We have a little campaign going back to the 60s and the 70s. So I'm kind of trying to dress like John Travolta without the white suit.
Do you dance like him?
What was that?
Do you dance like him?
Oh no, I can't dance. I can play a horn though. I have two left feet. I'm Freddie Woolfolk, 4590 57th Avenue, and I too support staff recommendation. And I like the terminology the Commissioner Fletcher just used, the old Gifford style of helping people to get different items, fruit items and other items. I think it's a great idea. My main thing is that we make sure that when these different vendors come in, that they are offering a safe location so that people will feel safe coming, whether it's the park, whether it's county property or wherever. So that's very, very important, top notch. I remember that old Gifford vendor setup that you can go and purchase things. And I can't recall in all my years here in Indian River County anyone getting sick or from consumption or anything of that type. So I too want to make sure that we keep that as a prerequisite, that they offer safe consumption, safe products, and that they are good for the community as a whole. So I'm in support. I just got off the phone just now when I went outside with Mr. Joe Outlet III. He wished he could be here, but right now he's taking care of some personal family issues, but he says he's in full support also. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming today. Anybody else from the public wish to speak on this item? Any final comments?
Just one last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Stan, in your draft ordinance, it's the items for sale are limited to fruits, vegetables, food, and non-alcoholic beverages. Is that too restrictive? 'Cause I know some of the farmers markets I've been to, there might be like live plants for sale, maybe soaps or candles and things. So do we want to leave that up to the sponsor of the farmers market, what they would allow, or put it in the ordinance?
That's one of the issues, whether you turn this into a flea market, bazaar, Elvis paintings, whatever. Nothing against Elvis, but and that's the question. I think traditionally the focus has been, the fruit, the vegetables, the beverages, concessions, and the food, kind of like what you get at during MLK Day, out there at the park. So that's kind of the model right now. So one of the concerns in the 2012 workshop we had was not to have it as open it up to everything as a flea market or car sales and that sort of thing. So that's why we have it restricted right now, but we can certainly get input at the workshop.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Would you?
I have one or two questions. In not being a frequent farmers market visitor, so I'm kind of coming at this from a green side, not having a lot of hands-on experience. But when somebody sponsors a farmers market, and I'm trying to think of, I think the city has one on Ocean Drive, South Beach Park somewhere. But do the vendors pay a fee to the sponsor of the entity for their booth space? I mean, traditionally there's something, I would guess. If it's on public property, do we have to worry about, and I think at one of these pieces that the city had, somebody slipped and fell, and then the city or the county ended up owning part of that and got named in the suit because, so we have to have some limited protection. I'm not talking about, large hurdles to get over, but since we have had some experience at county-owned property where that type of similar event has gone on, that we just have to make sure we're protecting the other public's interest to have some minimum exposure coverage. I would think you'd have to have something if it's on county land where we would be assuming some exposure.
Well, we ran across the fact that part of that market the city runs is on our property,
right?
And I do understand they do charge vendors rent. And how we found out is when someone fell, they had us named in the suit, even though they didn't give us any of the rent money for the booths or have an agreement with us, which we need to probably get an agreement to hold us harmless with the city. That's a whole legal issue. I think it's a little different. In the city, they do collect, understand rent, which we don't get. I didn't know it was legal to rent someone else's property that you didn't own. But So they need to probably we need to reach an agreement just because of the liability in today's environment. Today's environment, it's, anyone can sue you. So
why can't we just, and I was thinking about this for the fairgrounds whenever we were having the fairground issue with the liability and all that kind of stuff. Why wouldn't just we as a county buy a policy for special events that covers us, period? I mean, it's kind of foolish not to have, so even though that's not our event and all that kind of stuff, it's still our property, and if somebody's going to be on it during a special event, why wouldn't we own a policy to protect us from that to begin with?
Well, as far as special events that we hold, with a third-party vendor, there's a lot of liability. And when you get into alcohol, that's a whole separate issue as far as the liability. We don't hold the license. They have to get the license to do that, so it'd be hard for us to buy the liability. We don't have a license.
But we don't own the license whenever they do it anyhow.
They have to get it.
I know. That's what I'm saying. So you have a nonprofit that gets the license for alcohol sales, I'm assuming, right? Somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but you have a nonprofit that gets the license for the alcohol sales. Let's just suppose it's at the Frog Leg Festival or something like that, and they're using the parking lot out at, I don't know, just find a spot that's somewhere county, outside of it, somewhere, and somebody falls and gets hurt. Why don't we already have a policy, insurance policy for that?
Well, we do have a policy for ourselves, but what happens is when a third-party vendor is leasing that property, that's when the complication comes in. And historically, to protect the taxpayer, we've required them to have insurance because of, and if we don't, there's other idea of liability, and Dylan has to speak to that. If you are deliberately not, if they get sued and they don't have insurance, then you can be there's additional blame for you.
And I'm clear on that, and that's basically what I'm looking at. It has got to be cheaper for the county to buy protection for us through an insurance policy for 12 months out of the year, 365 days a year, than it is for somebody in the Gifford community to buy it for one day. And we could probably turn around and get countywide coverage from Ocean Drive to Gifford to wherever, to even the fairgrounds. And even if we had to, for example, it may be a whole lot cheaper for them to pay us $300 for the premium for that day than it is for them to go out and buy a policy that's going to cost them $1,500 to $2,000 for the day, if we require it.
I think that there's two things. If it's it's a different when you look at the fairgrounds to our parks. When we have a park event, and it's an event that we hold, we usually don't have to buy insurance, and there's no alcohol. This will be easier for these kind of events. Our policy might cover it. It's when you're leasing for a commercial, like a concert, gun show, things like that, it's more complicated with your policy.
I have a question. I mean, we seem to be going over to farmer markets events here, which isn't quite how I saw this working out. I mean, we just mentioned insurance at one cost and $75 permit and stuff like that. I envisioned it's a certain time of year, watermelons are coming in, a guy drives over to the center part of the state, picks up a bunch of watermelons and comes back to Gifford and sells them by the side of the road. And I don't know if that's not how the Gifford community thinks about it or not, but I think that needs to be discussed when you have the conversation. I mean, I look at this as something significantly less formal than we seem, something simpler but less formal than we're discussing here.
Yeah.
And if we're talking about, having somebody have to get insurance and get a permit and get anything else, you're not going to have anything in the community. As just the way I see it. I mean, that's so. Anyway, as you go forward, I wish you'd keep that in mind. I mean, I don't want to squash it out before anything's even occurred.
I think what the ordinance would allow is someone to come in and essentially you approve a site for temporary uses, and you could have a number of events throughout the year or not.
Not even events. I mean, once you talk about events, it's already more formal than I think that this is called for. But again, going back, there was some of this back when I got here in 1980, in 81, and I don't think that anybody who was the side of the road on 49th Street had a permit, had insurance, had more than half a tank of gas until after he sold what was in the back of his truck and filled it up again. So just please keep that in mind. I mean,
And I kind of remember that as the old Gifford days where they'd have
and not even old Gifford
in their front yard.
Yeah, wherever they could pack the truck, or wherever that gentleman driving that truck that day thought he'd get the most traffic and sell the most watermelons or okra or whatever it was in the truck.
Greens.
But I mean,
greens.
So anyway, I just hope that you could consider that going forward and try to make it as simple as possible, and maybe that ought to be a real part of the discussion when you talk to the Gifford community. So do you want any specific direction at this time, or is the consensus so far enough for you? Would you like a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move staff's recommendation to have an open forum in the Gifford community and to establish the guidelines for the anticipated approval of the farmers market in Gifford.
I'll take that as a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, the as a second from Commissioner Zork. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next up is a consideration of the Gifford Neighborhood Plan Annual Report Card for 2015. And Stan, is this going to be you too?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
This is the second annual report card for Gifford Neighborhood Plan, and the structure of the plan is such that it's pretty easy to do a report card. Just a bit of reminder, really. It was in 2014, the board approved the Gifford Neighborhood Plan, and that was the culmination of a lot of public meetings and workshops held in Gifford and hosted by the Progressive Civic League of Gifford and the county staff. A lot of departments and agencies were involved in the plan, and they've now been very involved in implementing various actions and projects in the Gifford area. There's a picture of the plan itself, and it's available online for citizens to take a look at. The plan contains 15 objectives and 82 actions that have specific time frames and responsibilities, and that's really what we get graded on with this report card. There are different topics that are covered in those actions: communication, housing, economic development, streets, sidewalks, parks improvements, 45th Street beautification project. I did also want to note that in terms of paying for and budgeting for a lot of these improvements, we have continued the practice of including Gifford Neighborhood Plan related projects in the capital improvements element and highlight those. With respect to what's called out in the action plan over a 10-year period, beginning in fiscal year 2013-14 through 2023-24, over $10 million are basically looked at for budgeted for improvements, including the 45th Street beautification and resurfacing and lighting, culvert improvements to local parks, 43rd Avenue sidewalk, stormwater improvements in East Gifford, and signalization improvements. So that's a big commitment, and it is being rolled out. The 45th Street beautification project is really one of the main initiatives in the plan, although there are many improvements that are going on with that. This is under construction, of course, along 45th Street east of 43rd Avenue, and includes a number of improvements that are listed there. It also now includes the drainage pipe replacement and water main replacement that you all recently approved. That's going forward. And we've had strong support from the community, even though there's certainly disruption with construction, and the drainage and utility infrastructure replacements are going to extend the project time frames. The community's been strongly supporting getting it all done right and getting it all done before the resurfacing, and they've been appreciative of the board's actions. Phase 2, going forward in the future, there will be more portions of 45th Street culverted and more landscaping on the south side. Most of the improvements that we're looking at now are going on the north side, although there'll be bike lanes on both sides of 45th Street with the current project. It's under construction. And I did just want to highlight, I believe the board and the community are aware of it, but staff from Public Works, Parks and Recreation, Utility Services, MPO, they've been playing a really important role in implementing the projects and getting it all done. So it's been a team effort on the staff part, and I wanted to just recognize those departments and their work. In terms of the report card itself, looking at 15 actions that had 2014 and 2015 due dates, 100% of those have been completed, and all 42 of the ongoing actions that are in the action plan are being completed, and of course they're ongoing actions, so they're annual maintenance activities or actions, and those are going forward. Staff's recommendation is that the board review and accept the implementation report card, hear any input from the Gifford residents or the public, and accept the fact that at this point, from staff's perspective, we're getting an A at this point.
Stan, thank you very much. I'll reiterate that. I believe you community development does get an A for this, but I'd also like to follow up on what you said, thanking the different groups. I mean, this is more than just a county effort. This is an effort by Community Development, Public Works, Utilities, MPO, and congratulations to everybody there. It's to the members of the Gifford community who have worked with our staff basically tirelessly and with the idea of getting the best possible result. I actually have to thank our county administrator who has been behind the scenes incredibly supportive of a lot of things that have happened, most recently with the collapsed culverts and the utility pipes. He did not hesitate for a second to say that we need to move ahead with this project and move ahead with this project in the right way. And given his reluctance to open the county pocketbook sometimes, I thank him for that, and I believe he did the right thing. And I want to just mention that I think that the improvements in Gifford are good not just for Gifford, but for all of Indian River County. So everybody in any way connected with this, including, say, Tim Rose, who's out there right now working on the Martin Luther King Jr. Park, I thank everybody for this and think that this is a tremendous plus for the community. Thank you. Anybody, any other comments from the board? Oh, thank you very much. Any comments from the public?
Freddie Wolfhawk again, 4590 57th Avenue. I am absolutely ecstatic when it comes to Indian River County. I didn't just say Gifford, because I see things happening all over the county, which shows we have that fabric, we have that bond, whether it's Wabasso, whether it's Fellsmere, Oslo, Vero Beach, Indian River Shore, the whole county. And as Commissioner Solari says, it's not Gifford just looking good, but it's Indian River County looking good. And that's the spirit that I really appreciate. Our president will be here today, as I said earlier, but he wanted to make sure I convey to all those involved, from the county commissioners, county administrators, the attorneys, everyone, Stan and his group. You're really, really, really are shining, and I want to continue to shine throughout Indian River County by using the Gifford project as an example to other areas, not only in the county, but around the state. Say, this is what you can accomplish when you work together. I always use the old adage that it takes teamwork to make the dream work. And that's exactly what's happening right now. The dream is working, and it's working because we are willing to work together, not getting everything, as our president say, in the real world we want everything. But we're not in a real world of that essence. We'll take some things and compromise so that everybody can move forward together. So again, we say thank you so very much, and we're going to continue to work together. We have crossed the river, but the ocean still lies ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the public? Name and address for the record, please.
I'm Linda Morgan, 3986 46th Street. Not really much of a speaker, but I want to say thank you. I really didn't understand much about this when it first started. Since I've been with the Progressive Civic League for a couple of years, I've seen things come together, and the project that has gone forward is great. The feedback I'm getting from the community, it's good. It's very good. They're appreciating what has gone forth and continues to go forth, and I just say thank you.
Thank you for your words. Mr. Brown, name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. Tony Brown, 4159 57th Court, Vero Beach. One word, awesome. And Stan and Mr. Baird, a special thank you to both of you.
Anybody else from the public?
Santa's here.
Chair will entertain a motion to accept the Gifford Neighborhood Plan 2015 Implementation Report Card.
Move approval to accept.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Fleischer, second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. We move on now to Public Works. Resolution opposing seismic air gun testing in the Atlantic Ocean. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Chris Moore, Public Works Director. I have with me James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. Last month at the November 3rd meeting, the board heard a presentation from Ms. Erin Handy of Oceana, who presented the process of seismic air gun testing, which is a process by which you can test for mineral deposits under the ocean floor. And basically they pulse air down through the water bounce it off the ocean floor, and then read the bounce back. And it doesn't take too much of a stretch to conclude that this could have a possible adverse impact on marine life. Could be quite harmful. So at the time, we didn't have anyone speaking on from the other perspective in support of such testing, and we've kind of reached out to the industry and seen if there is anyone who would come in and speak. And we couldn't find anyone, but we did move forward with to draft a resolution that would ban seismic airgun testing, but would support more passive, lower impact alternative technologies, and that resolution is in your backup beginning on page 216.
Chris, you also had some backup from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. And I read through it, and my takeaway was, quoting from the document, there's been no documented scientific evidence of noise from air guns used in geological and geophysical seismic activities adversely affecting marine animal populations or coastal communities. Was there anything else in the backup which contradicted that? Okay, I
didn't think so.
Again, it doesn't say, again, from the experts say that there's no documentation of harm yet. I understand that there could be, but there could be a lot of things. I could be thin one day, but some things just aren't too realistic. Okay, any questions of staff?
Well, just on that point, a couple things. One is, I don't know where this bureau gets their funding, but they're kind of a promotion for the energy industry, so they may have a little bit bias. And in that backup, they do state that there are potential takes, such as temporarily leaving the survey area, which if you have, like the endangered right whale that migrates down here in the winter for calving and stuff, and if they get chased out of this area during that critical period of their life cycle, that could be a huge negative impact. So I wouldn't say that their publication says there's no evidence of any negative activity. I think you kind of have to read through this thing and realize where they're coming from. Supporting the industry, they're obviously going to have a favorable spin on any aspect of it. So,
right, and I don't think that there was any hard evidence that anyone brought forward, but it just seems logical to conclude that given the nature of this type of testing, that it could be harmful.
Any other questions of staff?
Mr. Chairman, just to bring up to kind of counter, and I don't know anybody from the BOEM group, but when I did research Oceana, they're a multi-million-dollar kind of, I don't want to say anti-fossil fuel company in general globally. They're very well funded, very well lobbied in D.C. That they're not a homegrown grassroots effort. They're a multi-million-dollar national group that opposes a lot of domestic energy production events. Saying that, I still think we should look at the way the resolution is put together, that we're proposing alternative, less intensive uses that's good for the environment in general. Thank you.
Any other comments? Anybody want to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the attached resolution.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Flesher. Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Passes 3-2. Commissioners Davis and Solari voting in the negative. Moving on, we get to county attorney matters. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much to the chair. The county attorney's office desires advice concerning the federal litigation relating to the All Aboard Florida project, that is the Indian River County et al. Versus Peter Rogoff et al., and also the state law litigation concerning All Aboard Florida project, which is the Indian River County versus Florida Development Finance Corporation and AAF Holdings LLC. A closed attorney-client session concerning these two cases, the discussions would be limited to settlement negotiations and strategy related to litigation expenses. The closed attorney-client session would be held on December 15, 2015 at 10:30 a.m. in the County Commissioners Conference Room. The attendees to that meeting would be the County Board of County Commissioners, the County Administrator, the County Attorney, and a court reporter. Finally, just simply the County Attorney recommends that the Board schedule this session for 10:30 a.m. on December 15th.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Item B, lobbyists for 2016 legislative session.
Thank you very much to the Chair and to the Commission. The next item is the renewal of the Board's contract with Anfield Consulting for lobbying services. Last year, the county entered into an agreement with Anfield on February 17th, with that contract expiring on December 31st, 2015. The original contract was for $90,000 over that limited period. Anfield Consulting has requested that the contract be for $120,000, which would be over the full calendar year, January 1st to December 31st, 2016. As noted in the memorandum, the Board has budgeted $70,000 for the services, and that will need to be increased by $20,000. That will cover the period from January 1st through September 30th, 2016. Any additional funding would then have to be addressed in next year's budget. I would like to note that Anfield was very helpful over the past 10 months in assisting the county in, one, getting the state's All Aboard Florida's comments released to the FRA. If you may recall, during the period of the comments being submitted to FRA, the state had been slow in providing its response, and Anfield was very helpful in getting the DEP to finally forward their comments on the FEIS to the FRA. They were also very helpful in tracking the FDFC board member appointments through that process, as that was a critical analysis we needed to understand as we went into the FDFC meeting. And finally, they've done a really good job of building a coalition in support of the FMPA bill that is being considered in the legislature now. And with all of that, simply just recommend that that the Board approve the contract with Anfield as presented. Thank you very much.
Anyone have any questions of Mr. Engel? Anybody in the public on this item? Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Commissioner Zork. Seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
And thank you. And next up is approval of amendment for declaration of restrictive covenants from property exchange with Windsor Properties at the former Golden Sands Park. Mr. Dubraw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bill DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. Back in 2009, Windsor Properties, the county, and the Board of Trustees of the Internal Improvement Fund completed a property exchange for some Windsor property in the Golden Sands tract. If you take a look at your screens now, you'll see the property as it exists today. The highlighted parcel is the current Golden Sands Park. That used to be directly to the south of where it's located today, and the park itself used to be property owned by Windsor. What Windsor wanted and we agreed with was to make the Windsor properties contiguous. They agreed to reconstruct Golden Sands Park as it was destroyed or partially destroyed in the hurricanes in 2004-2005. There was also a cash payment made to the county as far as to benefit the purposes of recreation. As a result, or included in this exchange, Windsor voluntarily limited the amount of density that could be placed on the parcels to the north. If you take a look at those finger-like parcels that are on the far north part of the screen above the current park, they limited those properties to a density of 1 unit per acre. This was done back in 2006 at the beginning of the project and finalized in 2009. At that time, Windsor considered that it would continue the current trend to build the mega oceanfront estates of 15,000, 20,000 square feet. Recently, Windsor has come to us with a proposal that would be a little bit different. If I could ask that the overhead be shown now instead of the screen. You can see now where Windsor has come forth with a plan that would plat the southern 3 lots into a little bit different configuration. You'll still see that lots 11 and 12 would remain the almost 1 acre. I think they're about 0.9 acres in size. But the bottom 4 acres, 3.99 acres, would be configured differently with 7 cottage homes in the area of about 4,000 square feet each. With the single dune crossover, there would be a pool amenity that would be included in there. Again, this is a preliminary type of proposal that they have come to us. Like I said, the agreement between Indian River County and Windsor was for the deed restrictions. This was part of the consideration that was mentioned to the Board of Trustees when the swap was approved by the governor and his cabinet back in 2006 and completed in 2009. So it's probably going to take some maneuvering on the part of Windsor to have this plan blessed by the Division of State Lands. I don't know if we'd have to go back to the cabinet or Windsor would have to go back to the cabinet to get this density change approved. But the Windsor people have met with staff. We have no objection to the proposed density change. It does not increase the overall Windsor PD density. It does not add any additional units. This is just simply a shifting of the units to a little different layout than was originally planned back 2006, 9 years ago. So staff's recommendation is contained in the memo. It's to direct staff to coordinate with all interested parties and prepare an amendment to the Declaration of Restricted Covenants permitting the density change, and also to direct staff to have the proposed PD change and replat, which would be coming forth, an amendment to the Declaration of Restrictive Covenants proceed through the approval process at the same time. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try and answer any for you.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. DeBrawl? There being none, I'll ask if anybody in the public would like to speak on this item. There being none, Chair will entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Zork. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. DeBrawl.
Thank you.
Moving on, we get to Commissioner matters, and the first one is my matter dealing with what was a proposed item by the House of Recommendation to basically strip us of about 20% of the money raised from our tourist development taxes in the state of Florida. This actually, there was evidently a pre-filed bill which would result in 20% of our tourist tax dollars going to Visit Florida. That seemed to have gotten a negative response from a number of people. Right now, it does not look like the bill is going forward, but I believe it's important to us. I talked with Penny Chandler yesterday. It's important to the Chamber of Commerce. So if I could, I'd like to see if the board would allow our county attorney to follow this during this session to see if it does get any life. If they feel it is getting any life, to have a resolution against this and to communicate with the Chamber of Commerce. Penny from the Chamber indicated that if we did come up with a resolution, rather than reinvent the wheel, we give ours even in draft form to them so they could follow up at the same time. Any questions or comments on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to make that motion. And again, I'd put it on the TDC agenda as well, and I had discussed it with Penny Chandler. I still believe that we need to go forward, do the resolution, and have our council follow this very carefully. I believe that it's a great detriment to our tourist development endeavors, and although it does not look like it's going to take root anywhere, at this point, I believe if we do nothing, we see nothing.
So you'd like us to go ahead with the resolution at this time? That's the form of motion? I'll second it. Any other comments? Kate? Good morning.
Good morning. Kate Klottner with the County Attorney's Office. I just want a point of clarification. Is it that the board is against the 20% that was initially going to Visit Florida, or are you also in opposition to the 10% that was pretty much earmarked for the law enforcement? Because that seems to be still an idea that's moving.
We're okay. Then absolutely against that. I mean,
okay.
That is, expand that a little bit more for the audience at home. Yes.
Okay, not a problem. So as a general overview, there was a proposal, an idea out there, which would have earmarked 20% of the TDC money to go to Visit Florida, which is kind of a private-public partnership with the state of Florida. But then 10%, it wouldn't be the way the original idea was proposed, it would not be a mandate, but 10% could be earmarked for law enforcement. So say, for example, the example that was given at the committee meeting was Destin. There's 50,000 residents, but they have 3 million visitors. So why should the law enforcement fall onto the taxpayers of that community? Why not earmark 10% to go to protecting the visitors? That's the way that it was presented at the committee meeting. So the 10% in law enforcement, that does appear to be still moving forward. It might pop up in a different bill, in a different form. So I would be very curious as to whether or not...
But I understood that if you had that 10%, then you also were required to give 5% to Visit Florida.
Yes, that appears to be separate
so
now.
It's even worse than that. Mm-hmm. And I'll just note that, by my take, the economics of this is incredibly skewed. You know, they say that, well, okay, you're going to have, if you have tourism, you have more law enforcement needs, so you have that expense. I thought that we were involved in promoting tourism because tourism provided significant economic benefits to the community, like jobs, better paying jobs, hotels, so increased property values up and down the line. So I always understood that tourism paid for itself by the economic activity it engenders. If the Representative Gates's economics is correct, then tourism's economic activity is actually a negative, which would suggest that we ought to close down tourism in this county. So I'm not saying that I'm sure on this, but I'm going to go with the idea that tourism is actually beneficial to the state of Florida and does pay for itself, and that most people who have jobs because of tourism are happy. And I've never met a hotel owner who was 100% full because of tourism complain. So,
Mr. Chairman, just a couple of things. A lot of the tourism economic impact doesn't really get reflected in the county's general fund. Yeah, a lot of people do spend money in restaurants and jobs are created and things like that. But, if you look at our general fund revenue, the tourist money, economic development money generally doesn't have a big impact on the general fund, which is where most counties pay for law enforcement. So I don't have any problem if there are communities where this would help them, as long as it is an option. And any part of the bill that says we must direct tourist tax dollars somewhere, I would be opposed to. But if Destin says, hey, we need to find funding for this and it's an option for them, I don't have any problem having that flexibility. I think each county, each community should have that home rule capability to do what's best for them. And so I wouldn't be opposed as long as it's optional and there's no mandatory diversion of the funds that we have to do.
I'd like to point out one thing. Everyone who rents a room pays sales tax plus tourist tax. They pay the 7-cent sales tax, which we use a half a cent that goes in the general fund to offset our general fund costs. The 1 penny, the local option, also comes back, which we've used, which people who rent rooms pay, because you pay both the sales tax and the tourist tax to rent a room. So there is money that does come back that can be used for law enforcement in the general fund. It's the half penny that the state returns and the 1 cent optional, which we've used to buy cars. And it's substantial when you look at it, but I just wanted to point that out, because I've seen editorials that have missed that fact, because they forget that when you rent a room, you pay the 7 cents and the 4 cents, which is 11 cents.
And I'm not suggesting we would use it for that purpose, but I think there are other communities that do need it. I don't have a problem giving them the option.
Well, if they do need it, they shouldn't have to pay the 5% bribe to the state.
And again, that was my point. So, there's no mandatory as long as it's optional.
If a community feels that they do need it, then right now, the way it was initially proposed, the only way they'd be able to get it is if they paid 50% of that to the state. Right. I find that.
And I agree 100% with you, Mr. Chairman. Again, my point was, as long as it's optional with no mandatory disbursement, then I'm good with having the flexibility.
Okay, we have
Something tells me it wouldn't be optional, and as Councilor Cotton points out about Destin, I'm very happy for Destin that they have such a great tourist trade, but I'd rather leave that to their county commission to determine what they want to do for their indicative area and respective concerns, and I believe the representative has gone a little too far. In addition, I guess the same as if Liberty County would impose a cow tax, I guess there'd be no taxpayers and those cows would be supporting the entire county. So we can let those counties with these advanced burdens deal with them accordingly.
So on your motion.
Motion stands.
And I'll probably vote against it just because I think we're trying to draft a resolution and we don't even know what the bill looks like at this point. I think it's kind of premature. I think we should certainly have Kate follow it and alert us if it does start going south. But right now we're going to draft a resolution for a bill that doesn't exist.
And I understand that too. So how about, is there any possibility we write some resolution that's just basically says leave the tourist tax alone right now?
We can do that. Yeah.
Oh, no, seriously. I mean, something like that. I mean, and we can come back.
Just a kinder, gentler Bob Slory.
Exactly. You know, and then we can come back if they come up with some. I mean, I think it's a good idea to put our voice in saying that please don't impact this now.
Right.
So, and if they come back with something more specific later, then we can write another resolution or comments against it at the same time.
That's fine. We can just say we're totally opposed to the state forcing us to do anything with our tourist tax.
For any
So we'll tone it down,
tax.
and I believe the chairman has gone at 5-0.
Okay, so I'm good with that. Tony, the resolution is to come out in opposition of this, but in a toned-down manner, just saying leave the tourist tax where it is in the communities where it's generated at the present time.
And not to mandate that certain percentages be going on. Would you want to have that mandate language in there? Because that...
I think we can say, yeah, no infringement on our home rule authority to direct how we want to spend that money.
I like that, with language like that. Wow. Okay, there's the motion and the second.
Stick with me, Mr. Chairman. We'll get you big places these days.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
To the chair, or actually to the maker of the motion or whoever, would you like that back for us on December 15th, or would you like us to work with the Tourist Development Committee and or the Chamber to bring it back in January? Just trying to figure out what your interest is.
I believe we need to move forward as this thing was built up rather swiftly and then just recently collapsed just yesterday, or anticipated collapse. But in the spirit that it might be regenerated, I think we need to move forward, and we will discuss it again at the TDC as well, and I will be encouraging the Chamber of Commerce to follow through in the same manner.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Chairman?
I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
Moving on, we have Commissioner Wesley Davis, a letter of support.
Yes, Commissioners, this is just a simple letter of support that I'd like to get signed by the chairman. I've already sent one as County Commission District 1. This is just a continuation of the agricultural easements that the state's moving forward with. Of course, you know, this is near and dear to the residents of Indian River County with the bond passing of the resolutions that we've already moved forward with, and I'm just asking for support from that as chairman, if you would, as chairman, to sign that letter.
Any comments?
Is that a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion from Commissioner Davis, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposition? Passes 5-0. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several weeks ago, I attended the FAC Legislative Policy Conference and just wanted to give the board a brief update on some of the things that came out of there. I'm not going to, in your backup is a more detailed report, but a couple highlights. One of the things, they had an economic development best practices panel, and a couple interesting things came out of that. Under operational priorities, Palm Beach takes a similar approach to what we just approved with our positioning, in that they narrowed their target list down to just 6 or 7 key industries, and that's what we did last week. With the result of the positioning is that we took that broad, hundreds of industries, narrowed it down to the handful that would really find our county attractive and appropriate, and so they've had success with that. They've all reported that the consultants were looking for shovel-ready sites. A lot of questions from the consultants about the educational status, what kind of SAT scores, what kind of degrees is the workforce getting. So obviously for these companies, a good education program, a good educated workforce is critical to their relocation. One interesting thing, Seminole County reported that another major criteria of these companies relocating was the amount of nature trails and conservation areas and recreational opportunities. And so that ties in very well with, we just approved our capital improvements element, where we were devoting some substantial dollars to improvements in our conservation lands. Retention was very big for all of them. Swanee actually gives greater incentives for existing companies that are expanding than for relocating companies. In Palm Beach, their budget and allocations for retention are much, much greater in proportion to recruiting. So I think it's important for all of us, when we get the opportunity, to make sure we stop by a local business and tell them thank you and ask them what can we do to help you grow your business. There is a Florida Constitution Revision Commission being formed, and the FAC does have a Constitutional Revision Commission steering committee. If any commissioner here wishes to serve on that, just get a hold of FAC President Barbara Sharif in Broward County, and she's stated that she wanted to make it all-inclusive. So any commissioners interested in participating in that, certainly contact the president and she'll get you on the FAC steering committee. We did have a very stimulating panel discussion on hydraulic fracturing or fracking. We had a lady representing a environmental group from Southwest Florida speak, and then a gentleman from the petroleum industry speak. Was very, very interesting and some very good debate in the committee. I know Commissioner Flesher was in the audience during that. This board will remember several months ago we were asked to approve a resolution banning fracking in the state of Florida, and we turned that down and sent a letter asking DEP to do their due diligence. There was a lot of discussion at the FAC committee about a state ban, but what we ended up approving was 3 new policy statements, and I'll just really summarize them real briefly. The first was that we oppose any state preemption of taking away the county's rights to regulate or permit fracking activities, that we oppose any state legislation which would create a public records law exemption. What the industry is doing is saying, okay, the chemicals we're injecting, here, look, here's an MSDS, so it's public knowledge, but oh wait, they stamp that proprietary information, and thereby they block the release of that MSDS. So the second policy statement was to oppose any public records law exemptions, and then kind of, I think, going along with this board, our letter to DEP was that we support a moratorium on any new fracking activities until an independent and comprehensive Florida-specific study has been completed and peer-reviewed, and that mirrors some of the language that was in a bill last year that didn't pass because they ended early, but will probably come back this year. And then finally, the 6 main legislative policy priorities. You can get more detail on these from the FAC website, but it's tax reform, economic development, Amendment 1, utility relocation, which we think has been resolved and has now kind of calmed down, comprehensive mental and behavioral health policy, and a comprehensive water policy. And again, there's more details at the FAC website. And I did include in the backup the information on the Constitutional Revision Commission for those that might be interested in serving on that. And that's my update, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Commissioner O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
I just wanted to add that we all need to be proud of the committee chairman, Peter O'Brien. He did a yeoman's job up there, and there was a little bit of modest contention going on. The meeting was extended a few times, and I'll tell you what, there needed to be some order, and order was had, and I think we got to the right spot.
Oh, thank you very much, and I'm sure Commissioner O'Brien appreciates those
Peter.
comments.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Moving on to Special District and Boards, Emergency Services District. Chair will entertain a motion.
Move approval of November 3rd and November 17, 2015 minutes.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Flesher. Once again, the right side of the dais is doing all the work. All in
Trying,
favor?
sir. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to 15A3.
Move approval.
Second.
And this is a bookkeeping disposition of paperwork stuff. So the motion for Commissioner O'Brien, second for Commissioner Flesher. Any comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Approval of a fiscal year 2015-16 Emergency Services County Awards Grant.
Move approval, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Flesher makes the motion, seconded from myself. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
If I might, since we have two representatives in the audience, could we get just a short chassis update from Brian on delivery expectations since you're here, and I don't know if you have anything new?
And this would be deliver of the ambulances?
Yes. Yes,
Brian,
thank you.
Brian Burkeen, Assistant Chief. Just to give you a quick update, as of last week, I had conversations with our ambulance manufacturer. They are on the assembly line. They are approaching the end of the assembly line. We'll probably be looking at doing a end of line inspection here in early January, which will probably put them here within middle of January.
Okay, good.
Does that answer your question?
And then health department certification and radio and that stuff takes, what, about a week or so to we get one?
Radios are pretty quick. We have those scheduled in with the local vendor. We can have those up and running in a couple days. Okay. But it's in just some administrative paperwork for us to get done.
Okay,
so
good.
Absolutely.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Thank you very much. Moving on to solid waste disposal districts, we have...
Move approval of November 17 minutes.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Flesher. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Records disposition.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second from Commissioner Flesher. Any comments? All in favor? Aye. And I'll note at 10:31, the Commissioner has his mojo back. We're back on course. We are adjourned.
As I understand it, he was under the weather, according to what he...
Just in time for Christmas to you.